Thank you. Thanks.
So good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of South Oxfordshire District Council. My name is Sam Casey-Rari. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm chairing it this evening. Just going through the agenda. We've got chair's announcements as the first item. I don't have any announcements to make. Apologies for absence. We have Councillor Kate Gregory sent her apologies, and apparently we've got a substitute of Councillor Andrew Tinsley. He's not actually here yet, unless he's online. He's not online. Okay. And we have Councillor Ken Arlott online, I believe, and everybody else in the
decisions now. No? Thought they were changing it.
Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. So we need to adopt and sign as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2025. First of all, has anybody got any comments or changes they want to make in relation to those minutes?
No, Chair.
Is everybody going to propose that we accept those minutes as record?
I propose we accept those minutes.
You seconded?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Topping seconded that. Item 4 is a declaration of interest. So this is to receive declarations of disposable pecuniary interests or other registrable interests or non-registrable interests or conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. So the two items on the agenda are the housing item and the budget. Any declarations of interests?
No.
No. Item 5 is urgent business. I don't have any urgent business, so I think we'll just move on to item 6, which is public participation, and we don't have any public participation. That's point. Item 7 is the work schedule and dates for all South and joint scrutiny meetings. Do we have, first of all, does anybody have anything they'd like to comment on this or add to this, any proposals or comments on what we have already? Councillor Carley.
Yeah, I just want to check, there's quite a few reports that are meant due to come to this committee. I just want to make sure that they're on time because, every time I'm in meetings, there's always discussions about workload based on LGR. So I just want to check that these reports will be coming when they're due.
The two items down for your meeting on 17th of March, which is the annual delivery plan for 26-27, is on track, and also the arts centre action plan update for Cornerstone, that's also on track as well. Did check with senior officers last week.
Thank you.
There are a few things that I've brought to the attention of officers, and that there are two cabinet meetings scheduled to come up. The 5th of March, there's a cabinet meeting. They're looking at the Didcot Broadway design and build proposal and a nature recovery policy review. We don't have a scrutiny meeting scheduled in for those at this stage. It's a bit late to put one in effectively. I think the nature recovery is possibly going to see it, though I haven't had that. This is going to see it, so I'm happy with that one. The Didcot Broadway design and build, but just a couple of queries that I had on that, whether it's coming in on time and whether the design is different from what was proposed, I think, a couple of years ago, which was quite high level. Officers have asked me to put that via email. If everybody's happy with that, make sure you're copied in. And if you have any further queries on that, then we can leave that scrutinised as well by email as well. So if everyone's happy with that, we'll move them. But on 16th of April, there's a cabinet meeting as well. June, I don't think these are on our work programme, where there's a corporate asset management framework paper coming and housing delivery strategy and action plan. And I just put in the request that maybe we should have a scrutiny meeting before that cabinet meeting, and if anybody's in agreement with that, I can fill out one of those request forms and put that forward, which will mean we'll have another scrutiny meeting scheduled
When roughly might that be? It's just I'm away.
before the 17th of April, before the 16th of April.
Before the 16th, okay. I'm away from
Possibly
the
the week
8th.
before. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want to put too much pressure on officers to bring those papers earlier than they would have done. They need to be a week before the cabinet meeting, don't they? Anyway,
No, I suggest we take that away because Easter falls in that first
it
part
does.
of April.
I'm
We need to
exactly what I
check
was going to say. Have to think about that and see when that.
Yeah.
Again, it's good to keep an eye on. I think keep an eye on the cabinet meetings and papers that are coming out, just so that we can be aware of what's coming up and that may not be on our work schedule already. I encourage members to come to me or come to officers about those phones. Schedule them. Okay, so if everyone's happy with that, we'll move on. To the what do we do next?
You probably just need to note the work plan.
We need to make the work plan. Yeah. Is that enough?
I propose that we note the work plan as per the report.
Yeah, I can second that.
All in favour?
Item 8 is an update on recommendations from previous South scrutiny meetings. I don't believe that. Marshall, I'll hand over to you.
The last meeting you looked at the planning enforcement update and you made a recommendation to cabinet to know the progress that had been made, and cabinet duly noted that in their next meeting.
Good, thank you. So, if there's nothing further on that, our substantive items tonight are item 9, which is on the purchasing of housing with a £10 million allocation that was added into the budget after the changes to the decision on the Didcot Gateway building. And we have a report from the Head of Development and Corporate Landlord, which has been, and who is going to present this report? Is it Councillor Walker?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm here. Should be Councillor Morgan.
I've got a report on the 10 million allocation.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Walker. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members, officers. Pleased to present this update on the Council's programme to purchase homes for use of social housing and temporary accommodation. The purpose of the report today is to respond to questions how, when and where the extra 10 million as allocated by full council will be spent, and to outline the process for sourcing, assessing and acquiring those properties. This programme contributes to the council's priorities, homes and infrastructure that meet local need, and financial stability and innovative transformation. Background to this is that the council South Oxford became a registered provider in July 2023 and now owns 46 homes across multiple funding sources. The 10 million as allocated from the Didcot Gateway programme is expected to deliver approximately 30 homes suitable for temporary accommodation or general needs housing, meeting all decent home standards and capable of achieving an EPC C rate. As far as the location and property mix are concerned, the Tame was removed because of the low number of housing presentations in the Tame area. So the research areas now are Didcot and Wallingford, and the target mix is 6 one-bedroom properties, 9 two-bedroom properties, 12 three-bedroom properties, and 3 four-bedroom properties. In terms of progress to date, the report, as when it was going to come to a January meeting, was that 6 homes have been purchased, 9 were under offer, 1 was already occupied before Christmas. By the end of January, we've now completed the purchase of 8 units. Further 7 are under offer, and due diligence are progressing. £2.93 million has been spent to date for those 6 properties. And if you account for the other 9 homes that are under offer at the moment, that brings budget utilisation to around 60%. This generates a benefit to the council in that we have significant avoided costs and reduced reliance on B&B, which I think equates to 1.6 million for the current year. The properties are assessed individually with regard to climate and standards provision. We have a commitment to achieving EPC C rating, which this is in line with the Nature and Climate Action Plan. The better quality temporary accommodation will improve the health of our residents, the well-being and the educational outcome of the residents' children. There are no new risks identified at the moment through due diligence. Untangle my tongue, through thorough due diligence and compliance checks being in place. So the conclusion for this is the programme is progressing well. I ask Scrutiny to note the report and continue supporting the process. We have a couple of officers online to help with questions depending on details, and I know Councillor Barlow has submitted something already. Well, how would you like me to deal with those questions?
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, and I know that we've got Councillor Philippa Rivers and Councillor Barker on hand as well because of their different roles in relation to this, if they want to add anything or not to this at this stage. No, should we just go straight for questions? Okay.
So, let's go.
Yeah, so first of all, I see Ken online. Can you put your question, please?
Yes, good evening or good morning, wherever I am. Yeah, could you tell me, I should mention actually, first of all, which you probably already know, that I chair the Henley and District Housing Trust, and we have 56 houses. Could I ask the question, how many houses, flats or apartments amongst our 46 are in Henley? That's the first question. And the second question is, obviously I'm in favour of this. Of this £10 million, how much will be spent in Henley in the future? That's the question. Thank you.
I'm going to look to officers to answer the question about the 46. Do we have that information to hand, or do we need to respond later with the number?
If you just give me a couple of minutes, I should be able to give you that answer.
Right. Thank you, Paul. I believe the answer to the first part of the question, which is how many of the 10 million, I don't believe any of that is allocated with the Henley 10. The focus is on Didcot and Wallingford.
Okay, well, the obviously my follow-up question will depend on what I get from the first answer or the first question. Thank you.
The paper does have on paragraph 12 and paragraph 14 the sort of set out of where this 10 million is going in terms of the areas, isn't it? And Henley isn't there. And I think we've got Councillor Barlow had a couple of questions already. Am I right in saying that Councillor Cooper is online as well, which I didn't mention earlier, and she brought this paper alongside me. But we'll just go to Councillor Topping for now.
Yeah, I've got a couple of pretty straightforward questions. Are all of these houses brand new houses, new build, or are they a mixture of new build and existing?
I'm going to ask for a thumbs up from the officer, but I believe of the 10 million, they are all new build. There's no requirement for them to be new build, but these are all new build houses. Paul, can you just confirm that's correct, please?
Yeah, it's a mixture of old and new.
They are old, isn't it? Right. Okay. My second question is, to the extent that they are coming from new build schemes, are these part of the 40% that it has to be provided for affordable, or are these additionality in effect? So they're being purchased from the ones that the developers would otherwise be selling privately. So are we adding to the pool of affordable homes, or are we simply taking part of what would have been within the 40%? Andrew, question.
So Andrew? You're on mute, Andrew.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. My apologies, committee. Good evening. So yes, I can confirm it's in additionality to the allocation of section 106. Just to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good thing, my view.
And I think Councillor Rivers has got her hand up and to come in.
I was just going to come in on Councillor Arled's previous question in terms of, I mean, it is true that we would all love to have more affordable housing in our own wards. However, I think it's really important to let kind of allocation as to where those properties are be mostly based on where the demand is in terms of our housing register, in terms of homelessness presentations. Remember, these are for emergency use largely at the moment for emergency accommodation. And so it's a really important consideration. And as you can imagine, our officers also take into account where people want to be. So I think, yeah, I completely understand where the question is coming from, and probably it's because the Henley Trust is doing such a good job providing homes that perhaps they're not as needed there in terms of the demand. But yeah, I think it's certainly a lot. From the open market, so they will just come up where they come up, and we need to try and snap them and make them available for temporary emergency accommodation.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Ken. Did you just want to come back on that? Is that why I hand?
Yeah, I'd like to mention that obviously Maggie does not realise, you know, how many the Henley and District Housing Trusts have on our books at the moment. And a few months ago, it got that bad that we just can't take any more names. You know, I said we have 76 units, and we're lucky if we get one, maybe sometimes two a year become available. And we've got an amazing list, as I say. So I'm not sure where Maggie's getting her information from, but there's a massive need in Henley for any type of affordable social housing, and it's probably just as bad as any of the other areas. You know, you just mentioned obviously Wallingford as a prime example. So maybe we should spread our wings a bit farther rather than just assume there isn't a need for Henley. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Barlow, the couple, and then Peter, and then
Councillor Turner and Councillor Owen.
Oh, okay, and you've got something as well. So we've got a whole bunch. So we start with you, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. I was curious about the 50 million long-term hold, and just wondered if we're putting 10 million to purchase more housing, what happens to the other 40 million from the Gateway project, please?
Yeah. Can I just say thank you for submitting the questions in advance? It means that I'm able to give you numbers tonight, so that's really grateful for that. £10 million of that 50 is in long-term investments. £15 million is the SOHA loan, which we talked about at the briefing before. Yeah. 5 million is CCLA, which leaves the 10 million to fund the council share of last house purchases.
Okay, so it's the money that we see in Treasury Management.
Yes,
it's the same money. Thank you. Okay. No.
We'll just go around and get one. So,
yeah, I think it's a well-known principle that brand new houses are more expensive compared to a second-hand house of a similar configuration and location. How do we approach negotiation of prices when we're purchasing new properties? And I think bearing in mind most of them probably are new properties.
I'll hand over to officers because that's not something I clearly get involved with on day-to-day basis. Andrew, is that you or is that Paul?
That's myself. I can answer that, Chair. Thank you. So, yeah, so we approach developers and obviously we negotiate. The council's obviously a good customer. You know, we're able to make cash purchases. So we enter those negotiations with that in mind. And, you know, make a professional approach. But we have some skilled surveyors who are qualified who make those negotiations to ensure that we achieve best value wherever we can.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Turner, I think Councillor Owain, and there's also Councillor Cooper online. So if we start with you, Councillor Turner.
I recognise why the target areas are all towns, and I can understand that. But are we deliberately excluding the smaller communities where developers don't seem to want to develop there? There are a lot of them. There are quite small communities in South Oxford. So is it policy not to look at the smaller areas?
I think policy is to look at where there is the greatest identified need. And I believe Didcot and Wallingford at the moment, those are the areas where officers have identified the greatest need. But I don't think it's a policy of not going to smaller communities. The policy is to try and address where the identified need is greatest. Paul?
Yeah, that is correct. We've tried to be driven by where demand is, but there are a number of other factors that we'll also take into account. We want to make sure that we can manage and maintain the properties once when they've got people in them, and obviously having properties in smaller numbers of locations make it much easier for our repairs and maintenance to get out and do the repairs and maintenance work, for our officers to go out and visit tenants. So whilst we haven't deliberately said we wouldn't buy in any one particular location, it clearly makes more sense to have a smaller number of locations rather than them spread across the entire district.
Thank you.
Yeah, we talked a lot about demand and where the demand is. To what extent does the supply also determine where a house should be? Because obviously from local knowledge, Didcot and Wallingford have got big housing estates that have just been built, so there is a supply. I wonder to what extent that is skewing the way in which the place where we're buying, because obviously elsewhere there isn't necessarily the supply.
Who'd like to take that? Councillor Morgan?
So I guess in a way that it's easier to get houses in Didcot and Wallingford because they're actually being built. There are some communities which, clearly, if there's very little being built, it's not available. But it does come back to almost to the answer to the previous question: is Didcot and Wallingford particularly have been identified as areas of greatest demand. So that's where officers are looking first for the new housing. But so I think clearly it means that we move more quickly on the areas where housing is being built, but it still comes back to that's where the demand is.
But I think that the thrust of some of this is there a risk, therefore, that there are certain areas that are being missed out? I mean, and how are you managing that risk and looking at that risk for the future? Is that something that should be on your radar? I think
it is something that is on the radar. I'll take that back and make certain we look at that with officers when we're looking at that, definitely.
From the rural perspective as well as the support.
I mean, there will be some small communities where there is a demand, but it may not be possible to fulfil it. I mean, we all know the demand for housing is huge, and we can't meet all of the need. We're trying to meet the biggest identified need as best we can. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Khan, and then I'll go to Councillor Cooper.
Dennis Cooper and then Councillor Tinsley. I've just got 3 quick questions, so Chair, if you indulge me.
Can I answer one at a time, please?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. When we put an offer in or when we go for a viewing, do we say we're from SODC?
I'll refer to probably Andrew or Paul on that one.
Not straight away, Chair, no.
Okay. My next question is, how successful are we in terms of completing it and trying to buy the properties in a certain time frame? Because someone I know was selling their house and they had SODC come and view it and then put an offer in. And the agent said because obviously where the house is, it's in it's great location, it's easy to get to, etc., etc. So they had 2 or 3 offers, and the agent said, do not go with SODC because it could take 6 to 9 months to complete. So is that true? Because obviously, if that is the case, we're going to be losing out on a lot of properties.
Yeah, certainly we would be. So that isn't the case. We know we do move quickly. We have due diligence to do. Also, we have public money that we as you all know, that we have to mitigate, make sure we know we're getting best value. But the team do an awful lot of due diligence. And obviously the figures presented to you today shows that we are moving a lot quicker than 9 months, 6 to 9 months. But I certainly note your concerns, Chair, and we'll see very alive to that fact.
Because the agents are getting that information from somewhere, because that's obviously put us in a bad position on this particular occasion, because the person who was selling their house had 3 offers, and the one they discounted, the SODC one, straight away, and said that I'm not waiting 6 months to complete on the property. So they went with another one which completed within 6 to 8 weeks. So we need to make sure that whoever we're using have got the right information.
I want to know who your solicitor is if you complete 6 to 8 weeks on a house purchase.
Well, it's 6 months is not should be that.
Can I suggest, if you have that information, maybe take it offline and ask Andrew and Paul to investigate to see what the property was and whether that actually was true or if anecdotal.
Right.
For example.
And my final question is, these properties, how long are people staying in them? And are we giving them a tenancy, or is it just a very short term?
Do you want to answer that one, Paul?
Yeah, at the moment we're pretty much using them as what we call temporary accommodation. So they have a specific form of tenancy that is covered by that. The amount of time that they're staying in can vary, and sometimes it can be quite long, but it's not what's called a secure tenancy that we're offering at the moment. Can I also just come back on that previous point? And Andrew was entirely right in terms of how quick that we're turning around properties. But I think the other thing we need to remember is that buying a property for the council to provide as any form of accommodation, whether it's temporary accommodation or a social housing, is very different from what any of us might do in terms of purchasing our home. We've got to make sure that that property is suitable for the sorts of people that we're going to be putting in there. We've got to do a lot of work, as any landlord needs to do, to get its property up to speed. So Andrew quite rightly talked about due diligence, and that can sound like it's quite heavy, but it's really important that we're not rushing and buying the wrong types of property. And there have been properties over the last couple of years that we were close to buying but didn't buy because when all of the factors were taken into account, we pulled out from, and that was the right thing to do. So I just wanted to kind of get that point across.
If I could just add to the response, which is that the average length of stay in temporary accommodation for South in the third quarter, it was 105 nights.
They're quite short. Yeah. I saw Nick had just popped up there, but I presume that's been answered. So you're happy with that, Nick? Is that right?
That's right, Chair. I was going to say the same as Paul, actually, that we do have some additional burdens on due diligence because we're putting vulnerable people into a house, and we have to make sure that there's a lot of the things that landlords need to do. The other point I would quickly make in answer to Councillor Khan is that we actually appointed an extra locum staff who has come from the private sector to carry out some of our conveyancing work as a specialist, working on just that alone, so that we can make sure that the legal resources to carry out the conveyancing process are done as quickly as possible, and equally quickly as everyone. I know it's going to be investigated, but I would be deeply surprised if the issues were actually to do with the conveyancing side, and I had a meeting literally 2 hours ago about this with Gillian, our head of property team, to confirm that things were going through smoothly on that side. So I think you know, I'm not going to say that estate agents ever say anything other than the truth, but it's sounding unlikely.
Thank you. I think that was helpful intervention. Yes.
Sue and then Councillor.
Yeah. So, Councillor Cooper, you're online.
Thank you. Yes, one of the reasons that I asked for this report alongside you, Sam, was that I wanted to know more about how we chose where to put these houses or buy these houses. And obviously it's been touched on, obviously in times of need, availability, ease of maintenance. I mean, I represent Benson, which also has had large numbers of new houses and has probably got some spare on the site. But I wondered if you could say a little bit more about locations. And I can understand Wallingford and Didcot being good places, but does that reflect the general housing needs list as well as those wanting a temporary accommodation? Because I presume that those wanting temporary will really be put in towns just so that they can decide where they want to go in future, if nothing else. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, if you can.
I think Paul's popped up to answer that particular.
I see. Maggie has also.
Maggie wants to.
Yeah, I think Stu, you have made a really important distinction. We have various housing associations that provide affordable housing, or social housing, which is for long-term, for people to live in long-term. I think it's really important to note the distinction between what is effectively emergency temporary accommodation for our homeless cohort and that which is long-term. And of course, wherever there is building, there is the 40 and hopefully in the future 50% of affordable that will be provided on those sites. But this is a kind of specialist need, which is, of course, social housing, long-term social housing is needed everywhere across the district. But of course, this is a very different thing. And I think ultimately, I think need and where demand has to be the primary factor that guides where these places are. And I know that people have already asked about how long people stay on. Remember, once they come into these homes, we would vote on additional services, support, signposting, with the hope to then move them on to long-term accommodation, and that could be in the private sector, in the social sector, etc. What this housing does is prevent people from having to go into B&Bs, and this is where we are avoiding these potential costs that are absolutely hammering other councils, because we are able to put people in these homes. And of course, that means that we have the time to dedicate to support them into more stable accommodation in whichever sector that happens to be. And so I think it's important when we're talking, this is not long-term affordable social housing. This is currently all of our homes are used for temporary accommodation for our homeless cohort that effectively would be homeless if we hadn't provided that. Yeah.
Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that Councillor Philipova has said it very well, exactly what I was going to say. So thanks.
Thank you. And Sue, you're happy with that answer?
Sorry, unless there's anything you can add on the subject of Henley to answer Ken's point, but I would have thought there would have been some short-term need in Henley, and because you specifically mentioned Tame not needing any, but you didn't similarly mention Henley, and we're left with Didcot and Wallingford, which do make sense. But what about Henley?
And I believe, Ken can correct me if I'm wrong, but the accommodation that Ken was talking about is permanent accommodation, isn't it? So this report hasn't really covered the need for temporary accommodation in Henley. Am I right?
That is correct. now that the question's been asked, I'll go away and come back to Ken and to you, Chair, afterwards.
Okay, thank you. And I see Ken's there, but I'm just going to go to, I think Councillor Ryan wanted, no, okay. Councillor Timothy?
Yeah, just on the topic of Henley being a resident, Henley is also served, aside from Ken's marvellous efforts with the Henley Housing Trust, it has the YMCA estate and Sohar estates that are based around Gainsborough and Crisp Road. So they, between them, offer several hundred properties for longer term accommodation. Although, as you say, I'm not aware of anything on a temporary basis, but if it's temporary emergency accommodation, the first thing is to get it established first. And obviously that's much more preferable to being in a B&B. And as Councillor Philip Over-Rivers has said, it is essential to get people back on track and into a managed pathway to more permanent accommodation.
So I will come back to the committee with some information with regarding the short-term stuff for Henley itself. Now that's been raised.
Thank you. That's great. Shall I move on to, I know Ken, you want to say something, and we can't spend all the time on Henley, but Councillor Barlow has, and Councillor Topping, as well as, and I've forgotten your surname.
Peter Ramsey.
Ramsey, yes, Councillor Ramsey. Should we do it in that order? So we'll go Councillor Barlow, then Councillor Topping, Councillor Ramsey, then I'll come to you, Ken.
Thank you, Chair. It links to what we've just been talking about a bit, not Henley, but just the causes of needing this temporary accommodation. Be good just to understand a bit about that. And I was confused, forgive me if I've not picked it up right, but I was confused about if people are in this accommodation, are we paying for it or are they paying for it? And how does all that work, basically?
If the household, to answer the second part, so normally they would pay for it, but if they had minuscule or no financial means, the housing benefit will be claimed to pay those costs. In terms of need, there are a myriad of factors: marital breakdown, family breakup, all sorts of things that cause people to require that emergency, defaulting on rent and whatever. There's a huge number of different reasons why people find themselves in those circumstances, most of which are very, very difficult to get for them to deal with. Did that answer?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And what was I say next? Councillor Topping.
Yeah, thank you. Only mentioned 1.6 million for bed and breakfast costs. That's an annual figure, presumably.
Yes.
And that's the total that we're spending at the moment.
That's the cost to the council.
Yes.
That if this accommodation wasn't available, if the temporary accommodation wasn't available, the cost to South Oxfordshire in the current year would be £1.6 million.
Okay. So this is the saving by having the 46 and by buying the 30.
You could use the word saving or cost avoidance, whichever.
Cost avoidance. So that's a very significant amount of money in the context of our budget that we're going to be talking about later.
Yeah.
So that is because I was wondering whether or not that was the total, and then I was going to ask a second question of the 1.6 by buying the extra 30, how much do we save of that? But you're saying that by having the 46 and now these extra 30, that should save us, or not spending 1.6
million in the current year.
Right.
I don't have the figure for next year, but 1.6.
Significant amount of money. Thank you.
That's not Councillor Arlett.
I'm still waiting for the answer to know how many houses that we own in Henley. You know, as the conversation's going on, all the debates, questions going on this, we seem to be going from kind of different areas. You know, what is just short term, what is long term? Maybe if we could get some figures from the officers to see exactly what the need is in both those areas. You know, long term, what people need, and obviously short term. But you know, and it was mentioned about maintenance. Well, as far as I was aware, Sohar were carrying out all the maintenance for SODC. I'm not sure if that's changed. Well, obviously Sohar have houses all over the district, so it's not a problem where they go to do maintenance. I don't look at that as an excuse where we're going to purchase properties. I just think we need a little bit more information tonight as the questions are coming in, exactly where the need really is. And I say, you know, I could tell you where every house of the Henley Housing Trust is, all 76 of them. So I'm not sure why we can't find out where the 46 are from SODC. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So, Councillor Arnott, Paul has answered the question in the chat. There are none of the 46 are currently owned in Henley, and none of the new ones are in Henley. And as far as SOHA are concerned, SOHA do maintenance on their own properties. These are not SOHA properties which they're responsible for maintaining. These are SODC owned properties. As a housing provider, we will be undertaking our own maintenance on that. So it's not something that SOHA is directly responsible for, because they're not SOHA properties, they're SODC properties.
I didn't say they were, but your SOHA were carrying out the maintenance on our properties. Is that not correct?
So I can see Paul and Andrew popping up there, so maybe they can answer that.
Yeah, I can help answer that, Chair. So the answer is that it's now currently ODS who are awarded the contract to support our in-house services. So it was SOHA before, so that got updated some time ago, but we are now with ODS, but hopefully that clarifies.
Paul, did you want to come in on something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to help Councillor Arlott with that question about long-term and short-term need. So the council does have a housing register that anyone who is looking for social housing for whatever need registers with that. And the need at the moment, the figure is going to be approximately 2,000 families, units. That could be individuals or it could be families that are on the housing register. And about a third of those placements are what we call in-need bands. So we as a council are not going to solve the housing register on our own, because we're not going to suddenly provide 2,000 homes. That is why we rely on housing associations, big and small, to do that work. And there is definitely a need for more social housing and affordable housing across the country and within the district. As has been mentioned, what we're focusing on is the emergency and temporary accommodation. So helping people to come through, be there for a period of time whilst they find something else and move on. So it's helping people to come through the process who are homeless or a threat of being homeless, having somewhere to reside for a short term before then going into more permanent accommodation, whether that's provided by SOHA or anyone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Councillor Philip O'Rourke, you want to come in?
Just one. When we talk about management and maintenance of the properties, it's really important to know that we are not just talking about the actual building. We are also talking about supporting the people within it. And so maintaining the tenancies, as you know, these are vulnerable people, usually could be in distress following family breakdown, illness, whatever it may be. So it is important to note that although ODS provide the kind of maintenance of the property, we are the ones that provide the ongoing support for these families. So I think there are two aspects to managing and maintaining our properties and the people within them that is important to note.
Thank you, Maggie. I have a question. On the Homes England grant, I think it's a grant, isn't it, that you talked about in the report, and you're exploring whether to apply for that, to get some more funding for that. Is that something that you think will definitely happen? I mean, how far along is this as a project, as a plan? To make up for the 30, to get up to the 30 properties, dwellings that are homes.
Okay, yeah, I can answer that one, Chair. We're working very closely with Paul's team on the and Justin, who's our grants officer, engaging with Homes England. So where there's a development which could add value to that, we're actually approaching Homes England to see that through, and we'll make sure we keep all members updated through the DCL members update, which we obviously share with all members.
Thank you. Go on, Councillor.
Yeah, we've been talking about the areas of need. I would like to question the assumption that Tame does not have a need. I have a friend who was working, he went into hospital with a serious condition. He came out, he wasn't earning money. He spent 6 months living in a very dilapidated, damp caravan in not great health. Within certainly half a mile of Thames town centre, he's just been rehoused. So I don't believe, or I'd like to question, whether there is no need for social housing, short-term social housing in town, please. I can provide names if that's helpful.
Not in this meeting.
No, I know that's actually.
So I'll just come back. I'll come back. We'll review Tame as well, just to give you that answer. But the response when it was reviewed just before Christmas.
Yeah. This was, I mean, from last June to at least 6 months. He was. But
the numbers that officers see say that there aren't a huge number of presentations in Tame. I mean,
I'm just my experience.
There are presentations everywhere. Obviously, there'll be a presentation in a very small village occasionally, but in terms of the overall numbers, the presentations are concentrated within Nick Cotton. And obviously, I'll come back to Councillor Arlett's point about Henley.
I see there's a few more points. I'm just conscious of time. We've got another big item coming up, so if you can make this brief, that's fine. But do please just Councillor away.
I think we need to focus on what this report's about, which is the spending of the 10 million, and where we're going to buy 30 houses or so. We are, in the grand scheme of things, very small providers. Our 46 or 70 houses makes a very small difference in the general housing market. So in terms of spending this 10 million, I don't see what's wrong with a strategy that says go for the low-hanging fruit, buy as many houses as we can, address those needs, because it's very different buying 30 houses to buying 3,000 houses. If we were buying 3,000 houses, then we would want to address lots of different needs across the whole geography. But when you're only buying 30 houses, we as a committee rightly complain about how long it takes to spend the money. And I would say if going for low-hanging fruit means that we can spend that 10 million quickly and get 30 houses and have 30 households off the streets and in secure accommodation, then that is addresses the strategic priority that this money is put aside for.
Next point. Councillor Barlow, you have a question? Come back to Maggie and then we'll.
Do you want to make first?
We'll put a motion. No, okay. You first, please.
I was wondering, and I guess this is in context of our next item as well, the opportunities to continue this. I take David's points about this being a drop in the ocean, if you will, but could we invest even more in housing at the moment, given we can see the list is, really long and there's still lots of need, and we can see that there are quite a lot of developers in the area who are slowing their build out. Right. So is there an opportunity here for us to make a sensible investment and do more of this? And I wondered how that's been considered.
There's always an opportunity, but it comes within the overall context of the budget, which is pretty much on the next item. We're spending the money that we have available. We're bidding for money where we see an option for bid. The last bid, we put in a bid for a certain sum. I don't know if that's confidential or not at the moment. We put in a bid for a certain sum, but also identified that we could spend more if it becomes available. So we are, as a council, we're exploring all sources of revenue to go and purchase housing, but clearly within the local government constraints of what we're able to bid and what we're able to purchase. I get the feeling behind that, and it's the right one. Yes, we would like to do far more.
It's a good time potentially for doing that, and I guess questioning that against the other investments we're making. So
thank you. Councillor Philip.
So just to elaborate a little bit on David's point there, remember you asked earlier in the committee about the average stay, which was about 100 days. So that means that we would have 3.6 households within a single property, which is about 165 households in 1 year that we're getting from these 46 properties, right? So because of that turnover, because this is emergency accommodation, you see, so we are helping a lot more than just the number of houses. So I think it's just to say that, yes, we are not talking about a huge amount of houses that we own, but actually the impact is much bigger than perhaps first meets the eye.
Thank you. Okay, so I propose that we note the report and with a sort of request that, as Councillor Morgan has offered, to go and look again at the temporary housing needs of Henley and Tame and just ensure that the prioritisation is correct. We note the return on the investment that these purchases of dwellings is having, and that there's an application to Homes England for some more money, and you're exploring other avenues. Is everyone happy with that as a conclusion? I propose that. Will someone second that, and then vote on that? Yes, I'm getting nods. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Notes in the chat, but we're not allowed to do that, so I'll ignore them.
You are in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Right. Our next item is item 10, the revenue budget and capital programme for 26-27 to 2021. We've got the section 151 officer Simon to come and present to us, as well as Councillor Peter Paul Barker.
Shall I do a quick intro? Obviously, you've heard from Simon already earlier in terms of the budget briefing, so lots of really good detail there. And just to give you a flavour of sort of the political process there and political input that took place, although the general outline of the budget process this year was the same as in previous years, obviously that we were advised earlier on due to LGR that we could not consider new initiatives that would require significant funding or be something completely new beyond what the council currently does. And therefore our focus in the budget period has been very much on reviewing the proposals that have come forward from all departments and from cabinet members to decide what we can take forward. And unfortunately, you'll see in the budget that, you know, the vast majority of things we have been able to take forward. Many of those proposals for growth were accepted. And I'm pleased to say that includes achieving our objective of utilising all the available SIL funding in this budget and the next one, which takes us to the end of the period where this council will exist as per the current LGR timetable. Also, just to say that, as Simon mentioned, we were advised to produce the full 5-year medium-term financial plan despite LGR. And even though we only have a 3-year government supplement, so although that shows a draw on reserves in those final 2 years, you know, my view is that that's highly speculative at this stage. And even if LGR wasn't in the picture or got cancelled, you know, we wouldn't consider taking action on those financial figures at this point in time. But clearly that would become something that we should be considering as we get closer to time and as those figures crystallise and become, you know, something that can be more certain. But at this stage, we didn't feel that was either advisory or necessary. Simon advised also, you know, the other constraint we were up against, as usual, the £5 referendum limit, the very low rate of council tax that we have in this area. But, you the context of the budget was good income from Treasury, which we're very fortunate to have, and that we are making good use of. As well as, for example, other initiatives that have saved council money, transformed the way we operate, and the investment in housing and reducing that bed and breakfast bill that we've just been talking about is a good example. But yeah, so let's get into it.
Thank you. Simon, do you want to add anything? Or?
Not at this stage.
So, committee questions. I know that we've got some questions already submitted from Councillor Barlow and Councillor Ray. Do you want to start off with a question that you got?
Okay, thank you. I was curious about us continuing to try to make savings, which I understand in one way, but I was wondering about the balance of that in terms of improving services further within the same spend, basically. So looking at it in a different way about delivering more as opposed to savings. And I guess that links to, if I've read it right, it looks like we're decreasing our spend by £1 million in the coming year. And I was just wondering about that, why we're decreasing when we've still got the services that need to be provided.
Which line are you referring to?
I was looking at it overall. I think it was 0.10 from memory, Peter Court. I think I noticed that down.
I mean, in general, yeah,
there's a decrease, isn't there, of 900 or something thousand.
0.10 of the report.
Yeah, 0.10 of the report. Yeah,
not any.
I think on the specific point about that figure, Simon's best place to comment. In terms of the general objective, which we've also called transformation as well as invest to save, that's where we were aiming to improve the financial viability of the council by being willing to invest in new systems, new ways of doing things that would produce a saving. And that kind of overall transformation objective is still there. What we're not doing at this stage is introducing completely new initiatives within that framework. Due to LGR, this wouldn't be the appropriate time to start something completely.
Let me just check that front end. So that if you like, in 0.9, the savings is more about effectiveness or efficiencies from the transformation initiatives rather than cutting anything.
No, that is a separate point. But Simon,
can I come back to a couple of points really? So first of all, you're referring to paragraph 10 of the report,
yeah.
Where there's a 924,000 decrease. So I think first of all, there's probably two key numbers in that figure. The first one is last year we budgeted for the one-off costs at the end of a major contract. That was about £780,000. So that was in last year's budget that comes out of this year's. The other thing, and we drew reference to it in the budget update report that came to Cabinet before Christmas, is we've had the latest pension triennial valuation. And our costs under that have gone down considerably. I think it's of the order of about £700,000. So I think first of all, those two things more than cover off that drop, which means obviously to take those out of the equation, we've actually got an increase in costs. And I'd also reference again, if you're looking at Appendix A1, sorry. You're referencing the line total base budget after revisions. If you then take into account growth and also treasury income, in fact, our budget has gone up from 18.2 million to 19 million. So it's an increase when you take those factors into account.
Okay. It's really helpful to understand those two drivers in particular. So
I think the other point I'd make is there are no cuts in here. The level of service delivery is exactly the same. So there is no reduction in service in here. What residents would expect to see would be as before. Thanks.
Do you want to put your question?
A couple of questions. I'll come back to the second one.
Yeah.
The first one, page 52, line 64, which is the transfers to and from reserves, effectively the bottom line surplus or deficit. We're showing a surplus this year of 259,000, which I know is small compared to the total expenditure. But I could think of ways of spending £259,000, which would be in improving our existing services, not spending out on new things. I think of the planters that SODC owns in Decote Broadway that we can't afford to put any flowers in. So politically, is it sensible for us to go out with a budget that says we're making a surplus of 259,000 when our residents feel that services are tight and quite reasonably they've had this message over years that things are tight, and I accept that. But in the end, we might actually end up having a surplus of £500,000 or a deficit of £250,000. But is it sensible to publish a budget that says we have a surplus of 259 million? Sorry, 259,000. When we could allocate that money, whether it's to street cleaning or grounds maintenance or just somewhere where that amount of money would actually make a difference, a visible difference.
I see Maggie's popped up there. Councillor Pinto.
Yeah. I feel maybe this one I should take. So there were, I would say, 2-3 different proposed growth bids that at this stage Cabinet decided to pause because they required further investigation and reports coming forward. And at the time, officers reassured us that these could be looked at in year and look for budget then. So I think, bearing those in mind, I personally was comfortable putting that back should we need it for any of those projects that we are expecting to have reports back from. So this one example is, of course, the discretionary business rates. There was one which was around kind of the capital grant scheme, etc. So we just need to wait and see the outcomes of some of these, and then decide what we do in year. So I think this is a comfortable position to put it back at this stage. I don't know if Peter Paul wanted to add.
Oh yeah. No, just to say that, and I mean the example of the flowers and the planters, for example. Yeah, there's no reason why departments should feel they can't put those kind of figures in their budget. They absolutely can. These kind of bottom line figures have been moving around a lot during the budget process. So it's not that we set out to finish with a £250,000 bottom line figure. That's just where we are at this moment in time, and it's an entirely appropriate question for scrutiny to ask now that the figures have reached a certain level of stability. And we can look at what they are, clearly into the context of the overall budget, those numbers are very small. It could easily be £250,000 the other way. It's roughly a balanced budget, which is what we were aiming to achieve.
Thank you. Councillor Tomping, and then
just a quick question on headcount within the figures for the year ahead. Are we planning to increase the number of people employed by SODC or hold it roughly the same? I know unemployment isn't a big factor in our area, but nationally it is going up, and young people are finding it very difficult, including graduates, to find opportunities. Are we, as an organisation, expanding or holding level or reducing?
I'm happy to take some of that. I'm sure Peter Paul and Simon want to add to it. We are part of the LGA's graduate scheme. It's called Impact, and for the last 3 years we've taken on graduates. The person who was in the room earlier with briefing is one of those people. So we are absolutely supportive of people who come out of university that are trying to find their first career role, encouraging them to come into local government. I think the organisation has grown over the last couple of years for a number of reasons. One, we've brought some things back in-house. So, for example, the IT team now is fully up to speed from people we've brought in from Capita through 2P and to having our own in-service team. I think over the next 12 months, predicting forward, and Simon's leading on this particular work stream at the moment, LGR, we are going to need extra resources to help us make sure that transition is as smooth as possible, that we do things, for example, in HR to make sure we have the establishment data in the right place. We know what our IT systems are. So when we start partnering with whatever authority we go with, we've got the right resources to support that work, as well as continuing with what we consider BAU at the moment as well. So the workforce is likely to grow, but not significantly over that period.
Good. Like to add anything to that?
Only perhaps to add that Appendix B1 shows some of the additional staff which are classified as discretionary growth and therefore have to be budgeted and itemised separately for council's approval. But in terms of overall numbers, obviously not established.
We'll also add as well on our staffing levels, our retention is very, very good at the moment. I mean, the annual turnover rate, the last one I saw, which was in December, was something like 7%. If you look across local government sector, it's 10, 11%. And of that 7%, a number of those were fixed-term contracts that came to an end. If you look at the resignation figure, if you like, it's down 4 or 5%. So I think we are good at retaining our staff because of all the other things that we do. And I think moving into this next sphere of LGR, when things are going to become more uncertain, those programs become even more important.
Yeah, because it's expensive. You have a turnover of people.
Absolutely. Because I manage the recruitment budget, and the more people that leave, the more I have to spend on recruiting. So if we can retain people, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Tan.
Yeah, interesting what David said. But I view that 259,000. If I was running a business, I would call this budget a black break even. And if it was all being used, maybe a red break even. But how would you decide where that money was spent? I mean, from where I come, people would say, well, look, have all these wonderful leisure facilities, but unless you have your own transport, you can't use them. And that would require an awful lot more money. But what I would like to say is just contrast this with what it was like when we entered the 2019-20 budget, where the council was making major amounts grabbing from reserves, and we were heading for bankruptcy as a council, and we had to put that right. And I think the previous Lib Dem Green administration and the current administration, and all of us have contributed to put this council in a much more powerful position than it was then, when we really were quite worried about the future. So I'm quite happy with this budget.
Thank you. Any comment on that? I'll move on to, I know that Councillor Barlow's got a few more questions. I can't see any online, and then Councillor Tinsley, so start with Councillor Barlow.
Okay, in Appendix A5, I noticed there was, if I was reading it right, there was some adjustments to the leisure contract, which seems to suggest a saving in there. And I guess this is a bit similar to what Dave was talking about a minute ago. I think there are opportunities in that contract to do more things. For example, we've asked if the Riverside swimming pool could be used for school swimming lessons for Wallingford kids, save them having to go out of town. But we've been told absolutely not. And so I'm curious about that kind of sense of there being savings, and there could be services that could be delivered, I guess, differently for a broader benefit. And I do appreciate that's a specific, which you may not have the, specific answer to, but I'm just curious what you might say about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Appendix A5 is, the unused budget release is a bit obscure, isn't it? But I think in terms of the way we make the maximum use of our facilities in a flexible way, we absolutely support that. And I doubt that's a budget issue. Right. And please do raise it with the leisure team.
I mean, clearly, just to add to that, I mean, this is just the impacted the leisure providers' management fee payable to us. But it'll be it's that they run the leisure centres on our behalf. Sure. So I don't know whether Andrew Busby's on the call and could potentially offer a comment on that. But I think that there are options within the contract on how we can do that. But Andrew's better placed to answer that than I am.
Yeah, no, thank you, Simon. Chair. In answer to that, the flexibility within the contract does enable us to look at different activities. The surplus which has been reported is as a result of the renegotiated contract with GLL, and that's resulted in, as a result of the agency model being rolled out for the treatment of VAT. In specific answer to the query regarding the outside pool and school utilising the pool, that is down to an operational constraints, which I can follow up with Councillor Bardo separately. Hope that helps, Chair.
Thank you, and I would just like to echo that in the sense that I know that one of the things that I get as a councillor from residents is things like, and because my ward is close and somewhere to the Vale, outdoor pool is wider, Abbey pool is such a short period of time. Why things, I don't know, the pool at the leisure centre closed at 7 or 5 o'clock on a Sunday. So I think there are demands that I'm hearing from residents about the leisure contract, which could be looked at, I think, to expand if possible. Who else? We've got Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you. I was just looking in Appendix C, in pages 45 and 47. I'd just like a bit of clarification, please. There's under technical there. There are various flood and drainage schemes referred to, which don't have budgets beyond 27. Just wanted to ask, if we were to identify flooding issues that came within our remit or we were required to support, would that be exempt from the LGR restrictions? And just wanted to check that against our sort of climate resilience policy and future improvements, because regardless of who is going to be the unitary authority in future, these would be things that would still need doing, would matter very much to those local residents. I just want to make sure that our eye is still very much on the ball there with climate change and climate resilience.
Yeah, sure. In terms of LGR and adding a scheme. Yeah.
So in the context of specifically the LGR point, LGR doesn't stop us adding things to the capital programme, but we have to be mindful of the amount of the scheme, and certainly when there comes to be a Section 24 notice, which we talked about earlier, but it has also been talked about in lots of forums. You'd be talking about a restriction on a scheme of £1 million we wouldn't be able to do without seeking the approval of our successor authority. Now, the flood alleviation schemes we've had to date have not been of that value. And on top of that, very often, and Andrew might be able to sort of give some flavour as to how you've achieved it, lots of them have been able to be supported by environment agency grant funding as well. And I'd imagine that actually the opportunities to carry on looking for environment agency grant funding to alleviate those problems and progress those is probably something the team is still doing. As it's not been put on. I would imagine it probably hasn't been put on hold for LGR, but Andrew might be able to confirm if he's still online.
Yes, thank you, Simon. You explained that very well, and absolutely, that's not put on hold. We look at each scheme, each case-by-case basis. We work very closely with the lead authority, or flood authority, which is OCC, regular engagement with the EA, and to put funding applications through. So, absolutely, we haven't stopped due to LGR. It'll be a case-by-case review.
Yeah, just to add that the budget does put quite a lot more money into flood alleviation in that specific scheme, the weekly one in this case, but as and when that's needed in other areas where we're responsible for part of the budget, which it depends what it is and where it is. It's quite arcane the way it gets split between different authorities and agencies, but yeah, anything that we should be spending, absolutely, we're happy to do.
And can I just, on behalf of Wheatley residents, thank you for putting that money in for Wheatley.
One of the reasons I'm asking is there are other areas where flood problems are becoming more apparent, and And recently, perhaps in Didcot, if I can paraphrase it, we had a bit of a perfect circle of deniability where everyone pointed around the circle and said it's somebody else. So I don't want LGR to necessarily cause us to do that. So we're tending driving that, which I think actually we're quite good on. So just want to make sure the money's there should we need it.
So, yeah, different subject. We've mentioned quite a few times during the budget presentation how small our council tax is. And I wondered if the Cabinet was intending to correct the misapprehension on Facebook that our council tax is actually very high. And there are various reasons for this. One mainly is that the county council takes up a lot more of the precept than we do. But what sort of messaging are we planning to get out about how cheap it is? For example, I often compare it with the parish councils. And last time I looked, there were 4 parish councils that charged more than SODC does in its precept. I can name names if you like. Some of them are on the table.
That's not necessary.
Benson is the one that always surprises me. But yeah, so what are we planning in terms of messaging about what good value you get from SODC? Because we will get hit by people saying, "Oh, they're putting council tax up this much and they're not doing anything."
Our new leader is going to answer that.
Yeah, just to confirm that we do have some communications coming out on this very point. I think there is quite a lot of misunderstanding because obviously we collect the tax on behalf of 4 different authorities. So I think people assume that it is all the districts. And so, yeah, we do have some communications coming out on that quite shortly. I think Mark may be able to put a time to it and a date, but it's fairly imminent. So hopefully that will happen.
I've got the draft thing in front of me here, which says, where did your council tax go? Of £1 that's collected in your council tax bill, 6p comes to South Oxfordshire. It's a very small percentage. Obviously, the governance process we have to go through has to go through Cabinet and full council once those things have been through. And presuming the budget goes through, those communication that will go out will all be using various media, including the usual press releases, but social media, and trying to just capture some of those misconceptions about how South Oxfordshire spends its money.
I have a question for Maggie, and that's what you said earlier about you have possibly, or Cabinet have looked at 3 possible areas of spending that are not in this budget. That slightly concerns me, mostly because we won't be able to see it. It's not in this budget. And it concerns me in relation to something that came up before when we talked about the waste vehicles, which was brought to joint scrutiny. And one of the constraints on that was it wasn't in the budget. So I'm thinking, how is this process going to work then if you're looking at spending something possibly in 26, 27, but it's not in the budget here? How are we going to scrutinise that? How are we going to know what that is and where you're going to get that money from?
So first of all, any future spend will, of course, go through the normal democratic process of scrutiny Cabinet and depending on the Value Council as well. So if you remember, full council passed a motion at the end of last year around, for example, business rates, and we promised that a report will be written to come to Cabinet for a decision as to what can be done there, what is within the realm of the possible. It doesn't mean that we will do something, it just means that we will have to look at it. And so there are several such areas where we are waiting for reports, and ultimately we could make a decision on those in time for budget setting, but hopefully we could consider them at the time at which they come forward. And again, with no presumption one way or another. We have not seen the reports, and so we'll have to take it as it comes.
So you're saying there's a sort of part in the budget which is discretionary spending for the future, which that 250,000 perhaps could.
Why don't we add that on to it?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, is there a line in the budget that covers that possible spending? It's a budget. It's not. Well, it's not exactly. So it's not a committed spend. We're not saying, but I do feel that there should be a line in the budget that actually describes a possible spend that you may have. But
well, let Simon comment on. But there was certainly 2 or 3 different things that we were waiting for reports. That of course we can't make a decision or put anything in the budget without actually seeing those reports. So, which is why we were reassured that we can consider them in year.
Yeah, but they can come forward at any point in the year. They'd come, depending on the amount involved, would either be a cabinet or full council decision. If it was, for example, additions to capital programme, it's a full council decision anyway, because any addition to capital programme is a full council decision. So it would be transparent in terms of how they would come forward. And clearly those decisions, the decisions that don't come to council will be subject to call in as well.
okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions. Councillor Barlow, you've got a whole list, haven't you? Yeah, all right.
No, not at all. Appendix A2, there are just a couple of things which I was interested in. These are the opening budget adjustments and budget deal changes. Something relates to climate and ecological emergency. I just noticed it talked about water rates specifically in line. One of the first lines anyway. I'll find it back for you. In line 4. And I wondered, does that mean that it's an operational question, but it came up. Does that mean that we don't actually have water meters, we don't know how much water we're using, and that we just pay rates, or is that just the language on that table?
Just checking, and that's in respect of the Arts Centre. Andrew's popped up, saved me.
Yes, thank you, Simon, and yes, thank you for again sending the questions in advance, which means I can give you the exact answer. So this is in relation to Cornerstone. The water meter is metered, and it's a saving, basically as reviews the budget challenge exercise against a budget adjustment. So it's actually saving as a result of water being carefully managed and reviewing our run rate during budget setting.
That's good to hear. Thank you. And then a couple of pages later, on page 31, I noticed, if I got this right, that it looked like in 2930, am I reading it correctly? It suggests that we don't think there'll be an election on that line.
Just to be clear, we are only responsible for paying for our own elections. So
okay,
when we hold districts, when we hold parliamentary, county council, PCC elections or general elections, we basically incur the cost but are reimbursed by government.
Right.
So what's in the budget here is to reflect the 4-yearly cycle of the district and parish election cycle.
That makes loads of sense. So it's only district and parishes. Thank you. Yeah.
Would you like to ask another one? I don't think there's anybody else who can ask. I've got one question, but
We'll go on, you do yours.
Just on the charges, and you have answered this in an email, but I just wanted to get this out into the room here. Just on the charges and the fees, there's on the council-owned sewage facilities, the charges are increasing by 10% this year and then 10% next year, because that's quite above inflation increase. I just wondered if you could just let me know what you said in your email, because it is something I'm a bit concerned about.
Do you want me to answer that? Sorry.
I think Officer Andrew can answer that. I'm not sure that as a scrutiny member. Oh, well, sorry, scrutiny member.
No, I'm the cabinet member responsible for that now.
Sorry, cabinet member. Please go ahead. Yes, I'll answer that.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me this in advance. And actually, these small sewage works are something I do know a bit about, because I did a very useful tour of a number of them a few years ago. And we've spent quite a lot of money in upgrading these, and basically the services provided by those come from houses that used to be council houses and have been sold off separately now, and a number of other houses that have been added to them. Because we're spending quite a lot of money, I thought it was only fair that these things paid for themselves. We don't reckon to make any profit out of them, but nor should we be subsidising these from the rest of the council taxpayers. So we do periodically have to look at whether we're covering our costs. Now, some of the costs actually do go to Thames Water. And you may have noticed that Thames Water are putting their charges up quite a lot. And I did indeed look at my own rate for sewage, and where that's going to go is sort of roughly between the two that we've got coming forward. And I think once you start, yes, it is quite a big increase, but then so will everybody else's private, those on the main Thames Water sewers will be paying more as well. And this is part of the adjustment that we do every 3 or 4 years. Andrew can confirm the timings more exactly, to make sure that we are covering our costs.
Thank you.
Yeah. To support that, Chair, what Councillor Cooper's outlined, it's a 3-year review, so it's last completed in November 25. The council has a policy, a recharge policy in South, and that policy applies an annual RPI increase with a full cost of realignment every 3 years, like I've mentioned. So the last review actually indicated an increase of 17%, but we've buffered that with 10% this year and 10% the following year. And we're also right to the occupiers of the properties served by 11 sewage treatment plants. So hopefully that helps explain.
Good, thank you. How many more have you got?
Oh, infinite numbers. No, not at all. While we're talking about Thames Water, on page 38 in line 28, it talks about Thames Water funding expected to cover a particular post in a team. I just wondered what that was, please.
Page 38.
Sorry?
Page.
It's page 37, line 28. Oh, no, page 38, sorry.
I can answer that one. There's it's a nationally significant infrastructure projects officer post. You can probably guess which project that is. Right. In the policy and programs team, and this funding is to support that post.
Okay, and are they kind of obliged to do that? I'm just thinking about
it's a requirement.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple of pages down, just wanted to welcome the community cohesion funding. So on page 39, line 4, it's really good to see this, that we've got that in as an ongoing commitment. So thank you very much. And I guess being slightly greedy, wondering if we have any chance of increasing that as well, just learning from other councils as well. So.
I don't know which department can see that budget.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good example of actually there is a point to having these discussions in council and taking things forward as a result. And I think 50 is a really good starting point. Our officers are working on an action plan. And of course, this is to support this action plan. In the meanwhile, government is also set to, mind you, it's delayed by a year, are producing a community cohesion strategy. So we'll need to see what's in there and if there are any asks or guidance for councils as well. So I think for now, it's a really good start, and we can of course review it as we go along, based on what activities we end up agreeing as part of our community cohesion action plan. But I mean, I've been, I think people really do need to meet, and I think there is a case to be made for intervening in that and facilitating people meeting and coming from behind social media. There is a lot of anger there about so much, and I think the only way that we are going to make an impact and a dent in the very real problem, you know, isolation, loneliness, and all of the difficulties that come with that, is to actually get out there in communities. And we do have a nice little precedent. Our officers from the communities team got out to do an equalities roadshow. So that was a nice little kind of precursor to perhaps bigger things to come in 26, 27.
Okay.
Not sure how much more we should give, but I don't see why you should just carry on until everyone tells me to stop. So.
Okay. And I did give them ahead of time, so hopefully we can have the answers really well. On page 41, again, something really welcome, the Climate Action Fund. Good to see this in there. And I've talked to a few of the kind of volunteer groups in my ward, and they really appreciate the extra funding, but they questioned, could it not be that we could kind of consolidate some of the funding into bigger pots, because they're kind of getting form filling fatigue. It's quite often the same volunteers in really tiny organisations. And, you know, it's great that we've increased the councillor grants as well, but they're kind of small pots each time, piecemeal funding. Just wondered if there'd been a conversation about consolidating, because this is not all being charged and saying we shouldn't have this money. It's really welcome, but just the repetition of form filling and things. Wondered if you thought about that.
I mean, in the context of going to that sort of in the context of setting the budget, I mean, clearly the is to put the money in the budget.
Yeah.
So at this stage, certainly that they're not discussions that would have been pertinent to putting the money in the budget as a growth idea. So we'd have to take those away and put those to officers.
But there could, for example, be an opportunity to consolidate some now that they're in there, if that was appropriate.
I think if you were to do that, because they're all individual line items at the moment, so if you were to consolidate, I think we'd have to come back with this is how we would choose to disseminate that going forward, because at the moment they've all been approved historically on an individual basis. So I think at the moment it probably needs to go in on this basis, and then officers can consider whether that your suggestion is a way of changing the way they're distributed. But I think for the purposes of this exercise, it's about getting the different pots into the budget.
Okay. So there is some flex.
Maggie wants to come in. Maggie?
Yeah, just to confirm, I'm probably speaking a little bit with my previous hat. I don't know if Georgina is on the call and she wanted to comment as well, but you know, all of our grant schemes are reviewed, the policies around them, and I think a couple of years ago, going back now, we had a discussion around whether we should consolidate, etc. One of the really positive changes that has been made, certainly with you know, our capital and our SIL grant, for example, is that they dovetail in terms of their you know, the amounts, etc., so that you know, it could be easier for organizations based on their size and the size of their project, of course, to select which ones are appropriate for them. We have two grants that are more specific, and this is this new one and the arts grant. And I think ultimately it's because we really want to target the intervention, because we think it's important to invest in that area. Oh, and Sophie, Georgina is going to save me, but I think it is really important to give this emphasis and actually designate and ring fence this money for the particular purpose for which it's intended. Because if you look at some of the applications, I mean, they are really great, and it's amazing to see what we are delivering in partnership with our voluntary sector and parish councils. But you know, they range quite a lot. So if we really wanted to deliver some impact, then targeting is quite important thing to do, in my view.
Councillor Heritage, you want to come in on that?
Hi, actually, I probably don't need to, because I think Maggie has covered that really well. I was actually going to say the same thing, that that we did undertake a review recently, and we will continue to review the grant schemes. I feel really comfortable that we're appealing to different types of organisations at different levels with those with the different schemes, and as Councillor Philippa Rivers said very effectively, that they do dovetail very well. They're at different levels, but I feel very happy with the way that we've that we're managing those pots, if you like. But please don't think that we don't review them, or that we won't review them.
Thank you. I'm looking at your last 4 questions on capital programme, Councillor Barlow.
Yeah.
James, I can't see and I'm just going to suggest that actually the ones I think useful, the middle 2 are really just information, aren't they? The ones that are useful maybe the first on NPR and the second one on understanding.
That's fine. Yeah. So on page 46, is it? It's about the MPPDR 6.2 million. Just wondered if you could.
Northern Perimeter Road for people online.
Thank you. Yeah. I assume that's what it meant. Yeah. Could you explain a bit more about that 6.2 million spent, please?
Yeah, it's a long-standing item. It's a long-standing item. So effectively, this is to pay for, funnily enough, the Didcot Northern Perimeter Road, given that's what the acronym is for. This money came to us. To be blunt, it probably should have gone direct to the county, but it came to us as the accountable body for the Didcot Garden Town. It's been a long time in the gestation with the Gloucestershire County Council bringing it forward and coming up with a plan. I think we got to the stage where we're now at a stage where I think there was a plan and the county are going to get on with it, and we're in the process of coming up with a funding agreement. Because obviously the money's been paid to us, we need to protect ourselves in that funding agreement from giving the money to the county and then the county not spending it on something else. Not that I don't think for 1 minute they would, but in theory it's a risk to us. So we'll be looking to release that money in stages. Some money at the start and some money towards the end of the works. So we are expecting to at least see some of that money go out the door in the next few months.
So it's for what OCC are doing in terms of building the road.
Correct.
Right. Just to make
It's not the same thing.
Yes.
When is the end? As in, county are only intending to build half of it, and they're going to rely on the developer to build the other half. Having a cul-de-sac is not the end of the project, as far as I'm concerned. And are we going to hand money over to county when they've finished their half of the road and there still be effectively a glorified cul-de-sac, rather than, or are we handing it over when the road itself is completed?
I need to check the detail, but I think the simple answer will be handing over the money in accordance with the grant conditions that were put on us when we got it, if that makes sense. So beyond, and I can't remember what they were, and I haven't got the details of the funding agreement in front of me. So I think we'll have to take that one away and find out the answer to that one for you.
And your last question, shall I suggest this is the last question that we take? That's all right, on the underspend.
Sure.
Yeah.
It may prompt other people's questions, I guess.
Indeed.
Just like then.
Amen.
On page 51, under capital expenditure indicated P3 compares the actual capital expenditure in 24-25 against the estimate, and the variance, if I'm reading this right, is 16 million out of 34. I think we've talked about this kind of thing before. Simon, could you give us a bit of an understanding about why there's such a big difference, please?
I mean, basically, this is what came up when the report came to scrutiny in September, and you obviously I remember your views at the time on that underspend, and we've been trying to do some work on make sure we're not in that situation going forward. I mean, the simple answer is that this comes down to, in many ways, over-optimistic profiling of the capital programme. So whether mainly through optimism or hope, or whatever it is, officers have a tendency to anticipate they'll spend more on capital in year than they actually do. We've been trying to push back year on year on year. I'd actually say, if I look, it's going to sound a bit odd saying this, but actually that figure, if I look back at some of the previous years, budget versus outturn, that figure is actually not bad. It's over half. And we keep pushing officers, and we've done it again through the budget challenge process, and we'll do it again through the latest round of budget monitoring to actually be realistic in their profiling. And we do it when capital budgets are put forward. Are you really going to spend this money this year? You know, is the question we ask. So I think, you know, it's speaking in favour of the officers. They clearly want to get on and do, you know, you put the money in the budget to get things done. They want to get things done. And, you know, I think, you know, very often their budget reflects their ambition and their aim. And that's, you know, entirely right, it should, but it should also be couched in realism. And, you know, ideally we want to get those numbers to be much closer in the future.
So that's really helpful, because I've been on council coming up to 3 years, and it seems we've talked about this in all 3 years, and I'm sure it goes back beyond that.
Yeah.
What's the consequence of this continuing to happen? What can't happen because of this? Or is it telling us something about perhaps we need to have more capacity to deliver the capital, so we should be investing more in staff? You know, I'm just curious. There must be a consequence of doing this.
I mean, ironically, there are actually, in some respects, there's positive consequences. So, for example, you know, the money hasn't gone out the door. We've been able to earn investment income on that money. Now, the reality is very often one of the reasons why we end up overachieving on Treasury is because we thought it was going to go out the door, and you know, that could have led to different decisions. So there are sometimes positive consequences. I mean, there's no particular negative consequence other than, I suppose, the reputational damage of having said we will do something within a year and it doesn't get done. Now, the nature of big capital schemes, you know, I've worked in many councils, and to be honest, this is a familiar story. You know, in terms of capital, I'm sure Mark would probably say his experience he's got the same from he's worked in many councils and had the same issues. That's probably the main significance of this. I mean, sometimes there are capital schemes where grant funding is dependent on progress being made at a certain rate. So the PSDS schemes have been a good example. The decarbonisation works. If we don't get the works done in time, we don't get the money. And of course, what we do with those is we prioritise those to make sure that we do get the money. So those, you know, for example, in that scenario, those schemes do go ahead, and often other projects then have to slip because the officers have been hell-bent on making sure we don't lose money. So I'd say, you know, in most cases, we don't lose any dependent funding on timeline because we make sure we prioritise those. So the implication really is reputational. Or potentially, you know, the worst case scenario, if you've got an asset that's failing and we haven't repaired it in time, it may have to close for a while or something like that. But to be fair, there's very little examples of those things happening.
I would also add as well that, just as you mentioned, NPR3, we depend on other parties to come forward with those schemes as well. Some of that is outside of our control. And there is one scheme that we did spend more on, which is the laptop, Simon. So I did spend more money on that capital scheme. It was in future years programmes, but we needed to do the work. So there are some pros and cons, or quid pro quos, if you like, that you do need to bring things forward rapidly, not as much as we like. But I remember the report came to September, October meeting when you raised a similar question, and we are on it as best we can.
I guess it'll be what other kind of conversations could be had, because there are clearly consequences, and as you say, reputationally, but also what would it be like if we had more people who could deliver it, you know, blah, blah. Because they're there for a reason, aren't they, those capital spends? Okay, thank you.
That's the turn.
Yeah, in previous budgets, I've sort of questioned the upkeep of 2 churchyards in South Oxfordshire. Are we still doing that? I think it's Kidmore End and Wallingford, if my memory serves me right. And how do we actually justify that when all the other churchyards get nothing?
It's the closed ones, isn't it?
Yeah.
Andrew Busby's the expert.
Nick's going to start, I think.
Nick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably going to say what Andrew was going to say. Unfortunately, the mechanisms for the way in which closed churchyards pass to the council are set up in a statutory way. So the ones that have closed, that are no longer functioning, and that make the relevant applications to the parochial church council and the church will come to us as long as they meet certain standards. Andrew and I have done some work in the last year to...
Hang on, Nick. Sorry.
Sorry, with Councillor Turner's permission, this isn't what we're talking about, because the two that we manage are not closed. We have closed ones as well, but Kidmore and Wallingford are, for want of a better word, open churchyards. But we manage them.
I'm grateful you stopped me so I'd look less stupid. Thank you. I'll go quiet.
So, yeah, I confirm that still is the case. Obviously, we have Kidmore Road and the other cemetery, and that we've recently done some improvement works as well, as members will be aware. So those two open churchyards, remain as an SODC asset. How that come about? So some years ago, that dates right back. But so that those two operational sites are within our operational remit. But yeah, I won't go on to close churchyards because it's quite rightly covered that off.
Doesn't seem very equitable to me that we treat some churchyards differently to others. I know quite a few parish councils help to subsidise churchyards, and that's one of the reasons they have quite large precepts and so forth. But it just seems to me not equitable of the district council to treat some differently to others. Is it an historic thing that we?
It's an historic arrangement, Chair. Yeah, Councillor, yes, it is.
Maggie, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just that, yeah, we do inherit some of these facilities, whether it's churchyards or sewage systems, or indeed community centres in some areas that we have to operate, and often for the reason that nobody else would take them on necessarily. So I think we just need to make sure that we do so to the best of our abilities so that they're not lost. We know that burial space is certainly very scarce in the district these days. So yeah, but I agree. It can be inequitable. Some communities do get more out of SODC than others. But like I said, these are historic, and we have inherited this situation.
Agree with that answer?
I just think the whole thing is not equitable.
Well, noted. I think certainly Councillor Philippa Rivers has noted that. Okay, so no more questions. I think we should come to the resolution on that. The Scrutiny Committee is asked to consider the report on the revenue budget and the capital programme and make any recommendations to Cabinet. I've noted some recommendations here that the communications on a small percentage of council tax that SODC has as part of their portion, even though we're putting council tax up, is communicated well. But there's a surplus of the budget of something around 259,000, and maybe Cabinet can consider that's the best position to be in, considering we're putting up council tax. Flooding needs of the district need to be a high priority, and consider whether that's adequately covered in the budget. An issue about capital spend reprofiling, which I think is actually, already underway, isn't it? So that's a good thing. But just to emphasise that again, and then considering that possible surplus of 259,000, which I agree isn't a huge amount in the greater budget that we have, but consider other spends on improving services, possibly, for example, leisure services. I don't know if there are other recommendations that I've missed or others would like to add or dispute what I've said. All happy with that?
Yeah.
I propose that. Second it. We're all agreed with that? Thank you. So on that note, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask one question, which is just my information? Really? What is the?
Just wait till we
Just wait till we close the meeting.
Oh, sorry. Susie, can we stop the broadcast, please?